Good late afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike Tinsky from Ford. My title has evolved a bit. I am now Emerging Services Director, so it's really a position that's really in the heart of this transition that you've probably heard a lot about at this conference around mobility and around connectivity and how it's really disrupting our industry, our company, and all of the companies that supply to us and that partner with us. So I'm here today to help learn from you and also to share some of my views about how our company is changing, what we're doing relative to not only the technology piece but the people piece, and understand how all of these new trends are impacting us as a company. So I look forward to the discussion.
So good afternoon again. My name is Utpal Bakshi. So I'm part of the product lifecycle services, business for automotive and industrial, and that's an interesting part of business for Accenture, where we talk about how to help, we work with OEMs and tier ones talking about transformation of their R&D. So I'm here to give a little perspective of what we see across, because we do work across all the OEMs and tier ones, on how we are seeing the things changing with all the new technologies coming in. And again, would like to hear the perspective of the panel here and see we go.
So my name is Dan Ratliff. As Shauna mentioned, I'm an associate on the investment team with Fontanelles Partners. Fontanelles Partners is a venture capital firm focused uniquely on investing in next generation mobility companies. So automotive, yes, but we look broadly at anything that moves people, goods, or services. So I think I offer a unique perspective. A lot of our portfolio companies are working with the OEMs or aspire to work with the OEMs, but we have sort of a look at the earlier stage start of things and the talent on that end. So hopefully that'll provide a little bit of a unique perspective to the conversation.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Frank Wythe, the General Manager for Connected Services at Volkswagen. CarNet's our product. We launched that 3 years ago in the market. That was kind of our first disruptive technology, if you want to call it that, by entering this space. For us, it was a great learning experience just to get into the space, understand how these services are rendered and delivered to our customer base, everything from the ACN down to the convenience services of boundary alerts, speed alerts. But that also had an impact on the organization, and that was kind of the first push to creating a new way of thinking inside the company of how do you get the customer up front, what kind of customer experience do we have to build up in order to maintain that service loyalty by engaging dealers, but also how do you build that relationship out into the future so that we can maintain our customer base and build loyalty for the brand. You guys heard a lot these last couple days in this space about automotive car makers being agile. I think we hear a lot of that every day. But with agility come people. And I think the biggest challenge we have in the industry are finding the right people with the right mindset that actually have an interest in the automotive space. I'm a car guy, I've always been. It's in the blood. But the challenge we have as an industry is where are the car guys, right? Where are the people, the younger generations that are excited about cars? And I think the biggest opportunity we have here in the conversations we've had these last couple days, it's a whole new realm of technology, whether you call it disruptive, collaboration, everything above, but you've got a whole new different set of talent that's coming into the automotive space. And it's a young, really creative group, and it's our job to make sure that we harness that energy and we deliver that experience that our customers are expecting.
Yeah. So Harvard Business School professor told me recently that automotive is sexy again. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's certainly, I think it's always been sexy. I always love automotive, right? But
just look at us.
Yeah, we're all. Speak for yourself.
Oh, sorry.
About the rest of us, but I do. But what does that mean, right? It means there's a lot of new talent flocking to the industry, which is all very good. I live in Silicon Valley, where we have now it's Automotive West, which I love. It's just exciting, but it's also very expensive, and that kind of talent expects very different things out of the companies that they work in. So with that, what are some of the key challenges that are being faced right now with this new talent coming into an industry that has its own drumbeat and its own way of doing business? I'll pick on the OEMs first. Go ahead.
Pick on the OEMs, thanks. We always get picked on. So, maybe the 30-second version of just an example of how quickly we need to transition. I'm sure everybody in this room recognizes that Apple, as an example, is transitioning from a product company into services, and they do that through 3 platforms. It's no surprise that they make a lot of money doing that. So, for example, the App Store last year they made $15 billion. iTunes they made $5 billion, and then Apple Pay is their one of their new growth engines as well. So if you look at that as a value chain, and then you look at the automotive industry value chain, that money that they earn, just as a quick example, the average Apple customer only spends about $28 a year on services. So that, 20 billion plus was made on a very small, what we consider relatively a small amount of money that each customer is paying. It's just a large number of customers. And then when you look at our value chain, it's a much richer value chain, right? We've got the customers buying insurance. Think of every time the customer's rolling down their window to do a transaction and handing a credit card out. Whether it's a quick service restaurant, a toll road, even parking or fuel. And that value chain is thousands of dollars per year, not $28 per year. So I just provide that example because you can start to think about the different skill sets we're going to need to execute on that type of value chain than what we did 5 years ago to just build a quality product or an automobile. So the overall challenge, it's not an epiphany, but it's just a drastic change in skill set. And it's not just the skill set themselves and the disruptive thinking, the new framework thinking, but it's the quantity of people that we need. I think I'll probably hear the same thing from Frank, but we're just to attract that number of engineers to do that type of work is almost a physically impossible task. And so I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I think to add to that, you're looking at a clash of 2 cultures. You've got the very structured, very process-oriented automotive culture, everything's commodity and purchasing's eyes, to a culture that's very dynamic, very fast-paced, very energetic, instant response. We've got a whole generation of kids that are growing up on that culture. How do you bring those 2 together to be productive? And how do you support that value chain? And do these younger generation people entering the automotive space really have the patience and the endurance to tolerate the intolerable things that we do sometimes and shake our head and go, you know what, just give it some time. It'll work itself out, and it always does. But the responsiveness has to be there, and that's the cultural change that we as car makers have to embrace. Not necessarily the whole enterprise, but a portion of that enterprise to not necessarily match the agility that you have out west in Silicon Valley, but find that middle ground to keep the balance of still producing a reliable, durable product that engages the consumer.
Dan, what do you think about the people going to startups, right? Do they have the patience to if they get purchased by a big OEM or a larger company to push themselves through?
I think a lot of them can get the job done and they join the team as long as there's a commitment on the OEM's behalf to let them still do and build the business they were building. I think maybe it worries a lot of people early on. They're scared to get acquired or take an investment potentially from an OEM that is going to one-track them to a specific project. But I think as you see more and more investments, partnerships, commercial deals, acquisitions, and you see how that pans out and the teams are still having a great culture and they remain agile and they're not caught up in some of the things that people think, the ways that people think OEMs are still acting. I think that'll help ease any concerns. I think people used to graduate out of college, engineers, and they'd want to go work for OEMs right away, and now they're saying I want to go work for Facebook and Google and those types of companies. So I think once that you see that partnerships and you see the companies working together, the startups with the big OEMs, I think that'll maybe transition the point of view that that's the place I don't want to be, and maybe it is a place that I want to be instead. It'll kind of shift things.
What about you, Atul? What do you think?
So, see, from a consulting perspective, we see the whole R&D transformation happening in three buckets: the people, process, and the technology piece. Technology piece, we have talked about, I think for the last 2 days about all the innovation there. So I won't talk about much there. But the key part of the people is, we publish a vision every year. We have an Accenture Tech Vision, which we present on what the latest trends are. So one of the 5 trends this year is all about what we call as liquid workforce. And this is across the industry, something which has been implemented in the high-tech world pretty well. It's all about bringing in the right, it's about breaking down the traditional way of here is the organization with the team and all of that, to becoming a more virtual workforce and bringing in best of breed and even bringing in concepts like crowdsourcing and stuff like that. So we see that happening in other industries already in the high-tech world. I think that's going to come in and start coming in on the industrial and the automotive side. So then the second part of it is the process piece. I think the way the product engineering happens in traditional automotive, very structured, very process-oriented, I think that needs to become more lean and agile. So we're doing a lot of work around advising some of our clients on moving to lean, agile way of working, bringing in concepts like system engineering and model-based development and stuff like that. So I think there is a big shift in the organization, the way product development is happening in that space.
In terms of process, though, how do the hardware and software development happen at fundamentally different speeds, right? And especially on the hardware side, there's such a limitation with capital already in the ground to really do a lot of innovation there. Software, there's not that constraint. So how do you marry those two processes, right? Because that's kind of where we are today, is the innovation is starting to happen on the software side, yet the traditional industry has been historically very hardware focused.
If I can give my perspective on that, I think so. That's the challenge, right? So what we are seeing is a lot of times, even in our clients' organizations, the software and they don't have as well integrated the systems view as it should be. So sometimes the software has its own path and the hardware has its own path, and then they try and bring in the integration piece. So I think that it needs to start from the design thinking, needs to start from the beginning, with the systems view, with software and hardware working together.
Well, I think that gap's closing, and it's closing rapidly. I think the real driver is the monetization strategy. Where's the money, so that we can plan in advance the extra headroom we might need in processing power and in memory or whatever it may be, maybe a few more APNs in the module just to plan for something that'll evolve in the next few years. But I think the real driver also behind it is having that hardware link right where it's needed to get that energy of what you want to do. We don't even know yet. I mean, we go to these things, these are great, you hear some cool ideas, we want cooler cars and we'll build them. But how do you bring that world and the hardware world together? And they have to sit in the same room. They have to sit in the same organization. They have to really have that short connection to understand it, not to really debate it. I mean, everything's a debate in a German company, but to debate it and then move forward and make the decision. So you talk about organizations. This will be something that really has to be cross-functionally driven in that scope. And hardware plays the key role because that's the enabler. We learn that through the connected services. Then you hear about all the back-end activities. Those are the two critical elements. If you don't have that, you don't have a program. And if you're not good at it, you won't have a good program. So finding that balance. And I think that gap is closing when you look at the hardware development and just the innovation behind it.
Mm-hmm. In terms of, though, having access to some of the cutting-edge software, right? Because there's one thing to be developing it in-house, the other is to have access to outside thinking. How are companies able to best leverage outside innovation and bring it in-house without squashing it?
Well, I think there's a couple things there. You mentioned Automotive West, right? I think many of the automotive companies have established either research facilities or labs out in Silicon Valley. And that's really helped because we use that as a scouting lab as well as a lab to try new things out. So That's been a really neat experience because the number of companies that we're interfacing with has gone up exponentially. You probably recently heard that we invested in a company called Pivotal, and that's another approach. I think, from a people standpoint, which is what we're talking about today, I think that we had an interesting debate, a little debate over lunch about, we are now, the number of companies, the startups that we're seeing and coming in front of us is gone up hugely, exponentially. And there has been a very diverse amount of activity and in terms of their approach from a small company to a big company approach. And I think that we're going through a learning stage right now, that how does a company like Ford Motor Company really work with small startups, and how do we bridge that? And we've got to give, they've got to give, and we've got to learn how to work with them and at their speeds and their skill sets. And frankly, they've got to learn how to maneuver through our organization as well. And so I think that learning curve is well underway. It's been a really interesting one, as from my view. And I think that that'll just absolutely continue as we go forward.
Right. What about on the startup side, Dan? Is it a fear from the startup world that they get acquired and pulled in, or are they
Slow down and process oriented?
I don't know that being acquired is ever a fear in a startup. That's always, a lot of the time the end goal. But I think, losing the culture or something like that, being too sidetracked, we always look at it with our portfolio companies. It should be, a 50-50 relationship. It shouldn't be, we're going to strike this deal with you and you're going to be, you're going to be focused fully on what we want to do. It should benefit both sides to a certain extent, and that's what we like to see, and that helps it feel like a real partnership and not just like, this small startup is another supplier to the OEM. I think that's what they don't want to feel like. And in terms of being acquired, I think they just want to know, they want to know that they're a key part of the strategy, but that their initial internal strategy at the startup is something that's going to continue, or just understand how that aligns. They don't want it to be, day one you show up at the OEM and it's a complete change of pace and everything's that you've been building for the past couple of years is out the window.
Well, one comment to that is you go out west and you talk to some of the startup companies out there, and what really amazes me is the code's all for free. You can have the code, right? It's like, oh my God, you guys put some money in that and I can take it, right? It's mine. And that shows that startup entrepreneurship, because the motto there is that's just today's code. You haven't even seen tomorrow's yet, right? And as long as we don't suffocate that in the process of getting them integrated into an organization, I mean, what you guys are doing at Ford with the SDL, here it is, it's open for the industry. We tried that approach with MirrorLink, which was very European focused. Didn't really gain the traction in the US, but I think, the position that you guys have in the product, you're pulling other OEMs into it, and it's open, right? Right. So that's another cultural shift for us, and that's how we can nurture that relationship with the startups when we bring them into our ecosystems.
In fact, what we do from our perspective is a lot of times we come in and help bridge the gap, because we have this thing called Open Innovation Group, where we work with a lot of startups, and those startups don't know how to work with big tier ones or OEMs, and the OEMs are also not comfortable working with small startups in a lot of cases. So we come in with a perspective on the overall how the technology fits in, and bring the best innovation from outside and come together.
That's great. No, I think it sounds like there are a lot of good partnerships occurring, and that's a good movement. When it comes to core, really thinking about core skills, core talent, that's going to be part of your strategic advantage in the years ahead, oftentimes that talent has to come in-house, right? So then how do you afford it, right? Here are companies that are, the traditional industry is single-digit operating margins, yet you come out to Silicon Valley to hire the top software leaders, where $180,000 a year is probably for a starting salary of an engineer, right? How do you attract and how do you retain some of this top talent? Because it's not cheap.
Well, we bring them to the Midwest. It's a lot cheaper standard of living. I mean, it's a challenge. But then again, it goes into the value that it brings, right? if there's no business case behind it, then we're not going to price for it in the cars to make them more expensive. So we've got to find that balance, and that's all part of the equation. If you've got a higher expensive talent, then that goes in the business case. And if they're expensive talent, they're going to be good, and then they've already got the business case figured out for us, right? So, I mean, it's tough because the resources are thinning, which means supply and demand, the cost goes up. It'll be an interesting challenge for us to manage that.
Yeah, I would add to that. The number of opportunities keeps growing, right? And so if we had our way, we'd just continue to grow and add all these new core services, right? But the harder part is deciding what you don't do. And what you may have done before is no longer considered core. So the definition of core needs to evolve so that the organization just doesn't continue to grow. And that's not an easy, divestitures or outsourcing, I mean, those are not easy things to do, as you know.
Right, very true.
The automotive becoming sexier might be helping as well to attract some good talent now.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'll share just a quick example. I recruit at my alum, which is Georgia Tech, and it is so challenging to go up against some of these more established players. You can see at the career fairs, the line for Facebook is wrapped around, and then you're sitting here saying, "Hi, come on over here." I mean, I'm embellishing, but the fact is we have to change the way that we show what we're working on. When you get in front of students and you start talking about the things that you're doing and the type of disruption that's going on in our industry, it's almost immediate that they're like, "Wow, I had no idea. I would love to come join." And getting that word out is not easy because the other companies have this self-promotion that they've been doing for years and have a whole culture and established, and so the students migrate there without thinking. And to pull them into our industry and to get that great talent is going to take a cross-industry effort of education awareness, of telling students what they can work on as we go through this change.
Yep, absolutely.
From the venture perspective, I think you see a lot of people that want to go to these hot, sexy tech companies out on the West Coast, and that's because they can have successful careers. They've got great reputations. They're these fun places to work, and then you're always continuously seeing people spinning out and starting their own startups. I think if you start seeing that happen from some of the OEMs, I think that they'll become sexy again. And when they're known for putting out, their engineers move on and they build this startup, and it's a group of guys from various different OEMs getting together, and I think as the OEMs become more of technology and software companies, you'll start to see that, and then I think that'll help sort of spur that movement or that sense that it's a place. It's got a little bit of an entrepreneurial feel. It's got a little bit of, I can do more than just kind of go and grind as an engineer or whatever that may be, whatever the current thought is. But I think you'll start seeing that at some point, just given the kind of talent that's coming into OEMs.
Yeah.
They're bound to eventually spin out and create some really interesting things.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Interesting. And Frank, what about you and Volkswagen? Ability to attract talent based in, I guess you have an office in California as well, so you have both. Yeah,
we've got an electronic research lab. Used to be in Palo Alto. It's in Belmont now. I spent a couple years out there. It's their focus is on advanced research and development, but they're also one of our sounding boards as far as scouting and where can we go and what's hot and what's not, what type of startup is something that would be interesting that they can pull in on the research level that then we can take over when we productionize the technology. So we've been there for several years. I don't know how many years. I mean, we were there for the DARPA Challenges 1, DARPA Challenge 2, which one of them we won. The Desert Challenge we won. The second one was the Urban Challenge, came in second place. Partnership with Stanford University, the VAIL program. So we have a pretty strong history there in drawing talent directly from Stanford or from Carnegie Mellon or some of the other universities that we're partnered up with.
Great, that's excellent. Excellent. Well, in the last few minutes we have, what I'd love to do is ask the panelists, what would you like to see out of this, right? What is your kind of desire for the future state of the auto industry, the transportation industry? I think we had some good conversations earlier about kind of desired outcomes, and I thought it would be good to mention those to the audience now. So whoever wants to go first.
You guys are all looking.
Frank, you're the end of the rope.
I mean, I think the desired outcome is just cars are cool, and I think people are beginning to, like you said, the auto industry is reinventing itself, and it's drawing the talent because it is cool. With that, the hope is that it continues that momentum, that we bring that fresh young talent into it. It's no longer axles. I spent my company in that. Dick Dow always said axles are unsexy. He's right, or he was right. We're making automotive sexy again. And I think that's really the push, is getting that talent in there, creating the products quickly, so then somebody sees a Volkswagen going down the road, they're like, and all the content I got, that's in that car too. I can make it work. It's pretty cool.
Sure. So I guess we'll go down the line. I think to a certain extent, yeah, making cars sexy again, making having people want to go and join these companies that have been around for 100 years, and feel that they can go there and add value and change the way people move around, change the way we live. Think about this as sort of the next revolution of how are your kids gonna get to soccer? What's going to change from now and then, versus, we're obviously right now we've got the Lyfts and the Ubers out there. What's that next big change, and is it going to come from an OEM? Is it going to come from a partnership between OEM and startups, an acquisition? I think just understanding, how that collaboration works to change just the way we move.
I think from our perspective, one thing which I would prefer if things change is the way the auto OEMs and the tier ones are bringing in outside innovation in. Some of the process, the RFP process and the procurement process and all of that. I think that's still in some cases, geared towards a traditional way of working in. So some of that changing in to bring in new innovation from outside and embracing that, would be good to have some evolution there.
I mean, I'll just add to all those great comments. I think, it's up to us in this room and on this panel to spread the word about the changes that are happening in our industry and to get people to recognize what's happening. We like to just classify it as 4 pillars. We got connectivity, autonomous, mobility, and of course electrification. And all of those are brand new spaces that offer a tremendous amount of opportunity, especially to the folks that are graduating right out of college now. So if we collectively spread the word, and I think we'll all end up in a better place because we'll get the great talent, and our industry will benefit from it.
That's great. No, absolutely. And I guess I just reiterate that and reflect many of the comments here that we hear a lot about disruption on the West Coast, and I really hope that it's not disruption, but it's much more of a collective integration that happens, right? That there are winners out there, and that the companies up here today are the winners, and that we all have a better quality of life, better air quality, et cetera, because of all these new technologies coming into personal transportation. So wonderful. Well, thank you to the panelists. Very much appreciate your time. Thank you to the audience, and look forward to the next speaker, but thanks so much. Appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have to say, actually, we are currently miking up the next speaker, so I don't know if you had if you wanted to take any questions.
Sure.
I think we had one in that was sent in via the system. So it was, how will you know when you have the right balance of agility and innovation needed?
When our sales go up.
Yeah.
I think it's, look at the media channels that we're big write-up, if we're a big write-up on Wired, or, so it has its own dynamic and dialogue as far as, hey, look how cool this is. And the cars are we all have our own good-looking version of cars, but now it's taking it to that next level, and it's getting that market feedback from the consumers, from the younger consumers that are really engaging. And, look at social media, look at the Facebook, the Snapchats. That's really, for us, a litmus test whether or not we're on the right road with the younger generations. They got to be talking about it.
I think for every big press release or announcement of some new innovation, I think the real test is 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road. How's the traction on that big new service that you're offering, and what does that look like? Is it something that's taken off the way you anticipated it was? And if not, maybe the agility is lacking, and you need to kind of rework that strategy, or maybe it just wasn't a good strategy. But I think the balance is how you'll see the balance is right when you're acting on the innovation and it's really working.
I'll go back to my metric. I think you can measure this many ways, but I think if we become, and I'm saying we, meaning the whole industry and partners, become the employers of choice in a lot of the ratings and kids on campuses, I think that's going to be one of a real strong metric that we've succeeded.
That's a good point. And I think the metric itself, the metrics are changing, right? In the sense that the 5 years from now or however many years from now, the metric of success may not be how many vehicles were sold in a year, right? It's how many miles driven, and then how much revenue was a result of that, or what was the metric in terms of user experience, advertising dollars in a vehicle. There's so many different metrics that are going to be coming down the road here. So obviously it takes a lot of agility and a lot of innovation to make that happen. But I think it's captured well here.
Great. Well, thank you very, very much. Excellent comments and excellent speakers here. So please give them a round of applause. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.